Justin Wilson, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Jim. Thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Hey, it is great to have you here. So I love the tagline. It's on your hat right now, fixmyheads.com. So you're a psychiatrist?
Yes, that's a great question. Uh, that was kind of the early days of the internet upcoming service business. We were a yellow page player back in the yellow page days, and decided to get on the front edge of the internet, up and coming internet. And that one, we actually have the domain for American Irrigation, but that one came up and we were like, hey, that looks cool. Let's run with it.
Yeah, and
And
it's great because the heads refer to sprinkler heads.
you betcha.
And
That
they,
that's our main line. Now, sometimes we do feel like psychiatrists in the line of work, having the team members that we do.
yeah, well, whether it's your internal customers, the employees, or even your customers, the people who pay you. We're all human, and as humans, we're flawed. So we actually, as business owners, really need to understand human nature. Um, and when we do, it's actually easier to manage our team members as well as manage the customer. Meaning that if you're really good at the mind stuff, Justin, then you don't even have to be a good salesperson because naturally you just offer what your people, at the office need or at the home need, and they'll automatically purchase from you, stay with you, be loyal to you because you're like a mind reader. A lot of us just want to sell things to our employees, sell things to our customers and say, this is just the way it is, take it or leave it. And I think people rather have the choice to buy than be sold. Wouldn't you agree?
You bring up a great point, because as a business leader, what has been a surprise through the years is the amount of really success is dependent upon working with people. It transitions from, when you're a tradesperson, it's the hands-on things, to when you're a business leader, it becomes more of people skills, working with people, be it customers or internal. So you make a great point.
Yep. It's really important. If I went back to traditional school, and I do a lot of schooling now, I listen to podcasts, I produce podcasts, I host podcasts, I meet a lot of people, I read books, I study this. But if I were to go back to traditional schooling, let's say I went to college today, I I went to college. I majored in marketing with a minor in communication, which is interesting because here I am using communication tools, communicating. So that's paid off. And marketing, well, we're all in marketing and sales, right? But I would probably do a double minor at least, or maybe a double major, psychology. If I knew then what I know now about how people tick, my relationships would be better. My business would be better. Everything, maybe I would be, better just as a human if I could figure out how I tick. Because when you understand the stuff in here, the better we are.
Yeah, a lot of the studies that I've plugged into have brought up the point that emotional intelligence can be more important than street smarts, and that's my read on working with people. That's your success point. Be it problems on a job, or be it recruiting new team members. We've got team members that have been brought on board that it took me 5, 6, 8 years of working with family members and talking with them. And it's a huge investment in your team, but that emotional intelligence and understand what makes people tick is important.
Absolutely, it is. So you started your business 28 years ago, family owned and operated. You say it's a mom and pop operation, American Irrigation Repair. Um, so when I first heard that, I'm thinking, all right, well, Justin's out in the truck and his wife's at home or in an office, mom and pop, right? She answers the phone. She dispatches. Justin does the work and she does the books. And after work, they go out to dinner. And because that's how a lot of these mom and pop operations are. I I think I misunderstood a bit because you operate it as a family owned and operated business, but you have a pretty big staff.
Sure. So I call us a mom and pop because that's kind of the way we operate and have grown. I started the business not too long out of school, from the need of being broke and starting on something that you knew. And my wife came on board a few years later when we started dating. She was teaching school, answering phones, working as a CSR between classes. Man, it was a hoot. But and I was until not too long ago. Well, it's I guess somewhere around 2012 is when I came out of the field. But I worked in the field for a long time. And then even today, Ash and I are involved in the business. My field input may look more like a team meeting in the morning, and of course Ashley overseeing the CSRs in our office team. But we're still very much involved. It very much is a mom and pop operated family business.
So for almost 30 years, you've been learning, growing, serving. Did you always know that you wanted to be in this type of business? Not necessarily irrigation, but in the service business, dealing with a lot of homeowners in this type of industry. Did you think about that when you were a kid?
Sure. No, that's a great question. Um, Not at all. And in fact, I teach my kiddos. I tell them I wanted to do something different, more so in the years past. But I wanted to do something different so many times. I told myself I'd get out of the service business so many times. And I always tell my kiddos I was just dumb enough to keep going. And so it has been a rocky road to learn uh, that this was what I was called to do. It doesn't look like what I thought it would look like, but this is truly in the last handful of years I've come to realization that this is what I was called to do, and I think at that point is when I really dug in and started learning about not just the physical work and how to do it, but the things necessary to be a good business leader.
And that's important to be a good and great business leader. If you weren't good at leading, you wouldn't have, what is it? You've got to have what, 30 employees? You got over 20 trucks out there, right? So,
Sure.
so if you have that many team members, you have to be good at leading. Otherwise, you would truly be a traditional mom and pop. And that's if mom doesn't leave you because you're really bad, right? Well, right. Because running a business with someone can be very challenging if you're, married to them. Actually, running a business with someone's challenging enough. Living with them is challenging. So, how have you been able to grow? Because when you started off, you and your wife were doing a lot of the stuff. But now you're just not a technician. You're an entrepreneur, you're a business leader, you're a visionary, you're growing the business. How have you adapted to that?
Sure, that's a great question, and you're spot on. You know, we through the years, some years back, I probably 10 to 12 years ago, but we got to the point where we were so busy and we were both working ourselves so much that we got to the breaking point where I think a lot of business owners have gotten there is you decide I either got to make these changes and start to run a real business or I got to quit because I'm exhausted and I'm wearing myself out. And we definitely hit that wall. And we got to the point to where these things have to change. We have to systemize this business. We have to bring other people on board or we got to do something else. So we hit it and it's an ugly place in a lot of different ways, but I am proud that we did make that walk because I think a lot of that walk, when you talk about becoming a leader, being a part of that walk and having done those things is critical in coaching the people that you lead through the different steps that they will have to go through, be it a technician, be it a CSR. There's never a point that we're not able to look at a team member in the eye and say, I've done what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what you're going through. And I think even going back to the technicians, it's so critical when we're teaching and training technicians those different things to be able to say, hey, I did that. I've done that. I've seen that. I understand what you're going through. And so I'm proud of those moments. I'm proud that we hit the wall and we were able to recover from it.
Yeah. So you have the perspective and you get the respect as well because you've walked in the shoes. If I purchase your company, having never done what you do, for me to bark orders at people saying, go do this because that's what the procedure manual says. Okay. Justin left this for me. He did it, but he's now on the beach and retired. So, but I bought the company. I don't know how to do any of this, but he said if I follow the steps, but you see, the respect's a little bit different. They're like,
right.
Jim, you don't even have any dirt under your fingernails.
That's
well,
right.
Don't worry about me. Just do your job. And so you're, an owner operated, family owned. You've been there. If a team member for some reason can't do something, you could replace them in the field that day, couldn't you?
Well, it depends on what the team member's doing it, but yes, we can jump in and we have, when there's I think that's critical because things will always come up when you least expect them. And so being able to um our goal is always we can pick up different things in the business being a family operated. We can pick up different things, but our goal then is to search for a replacement to fire us and then be able to back out of those individual responsibilities. So that's been pivotal is if a team member has a health crisis or something like that come up or is no longer on the team, then we're able to jump into those different roles and then back out of them as time allows. So no doubt.
Yeah. And that's great for everyone involved. It's great for you to be able to do that because it allows you to sleep well at night, knowing what you know about your business. Your team members know that you can do it and you understand what they do. And ultimately, it's great for your customer. They may not think about it, but it is good that the person at the helm understands all of the pieces of the business. Let's go back to when you were 14 years old. And I think you had some kind of interesting vehicle that you were using to get the job done. Can you talk a little bit about the story when you were 14?
You bet, you bet. So I had a great mentor in my father. Grew up in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and he, of course, we were in the suburbs, the areas where you had the homes pretty close together, and Dad always instilled into me a couple of things: work ethic. We were always taught you were going to be out, you were going to be working, you were going to be hustling, and to jump out there and get something done, and then also the service business. And so at 14, I had a kind of a lawn mowing business and had a trike. It was a three-wheeled trike that I think my grandpa had gotten, and had a little trailer behind it with the mower and the weed eaters and all this. And so I'd cruise this thing around the neighborhood. Man, I'm sure everybody was laughing. And at some point in there, a neighbor picked up on it and called the local paper. I think it might have been the Dallas, the Dallas paper, and they ran a whole piece on. I think it was an article about me and my business in the Plano People section.
Yeah.
So that was a cool moment and sort of probably a pivotal moment for me. I was never good at sports. I was never the athletic kiddo. It wasn't the gift that I was given. But I think at that point I figured out, hey, this is something I could get out and hustle. I could be good at and serve the people in my community with something of value. And that kind of showed me my place, I think, at that young age, and it's been pivotal.
You and I have a lot in common. When I was a kid, um, I think I was 12 years old the first time I did something to make money, which was mowing lawns. did that for a few different homeowners, started cleaning pools, raking leaves. And I don't know if kids do it that way anymore. I mean, when I was a kid, almost everybody that I knew had a paper route or something like that where they had some type of job, but it might be kind of like, freelance, because that's what I was. I didn't have an employer. I had employers, which I love, by the way, because then not everything's, not all of your money's coming from one source, right?
Sure.
You can't get fired immediately by all, right? So I love your story because it resonates with me. It's similar to mine where, I mean, I didn't have the trike or anything. I mean, that's kind of cool. But there's something very entrepreneurial about it, and also something very simple because, it's not like you need licenses and permits or insurance when you're a kid. You're just mowing lawns. You're doing some landscape work. Is it really landscape? It's more like pulling weeds and edging. You can call it landscape, but it's not like you're, installing palm trees. Um, so it's a great way to start. And what's interesting, it doesn't appear that you really had a far stretch from doing that type of work to doing what you're doing now, because it's somewhat related.
Sure, sure. No, you're exactly right. I paid my way through high school. My family was a working class family, and nobody had a trust fund. There was no there was no family fortune that was set out, and so from an early age, I realized that I didn't like not being able to take care of my responsibilities and have a little bit of cash in my pocket. And so I paid my way through high school, buying vehicles and sort of supporting my own self, doing landscape and extended yard work like what we started at on the trike. And then as I went and did some college time and ran out of cash there and decided, hey, we're going to come back. And really the irrigation business started from seeing a need
Mm.
in the marketplace. There was at the point that we started up, there was a lot of irrigation installers, but there wasn't that many repair companies, and we saw a need to be able to hire somebody that specialized in that repair work. In fact, Jim, it's a funny story. I had a neighbor not too long after we started the business that looked me in the eye and said, "How do you make a living fixing sprinklers?"
Mm-hmm.
He kind of laughed at me. And, now a couple of decades later, I kind of look back and remember that guy as he was that guy. He was the naysayer, he was the guy that said, "Hey, you can't really do this." And yet, if you stick with it and keep hustling, just like the story from being 14 on the trike, you can do it. You can do it.
Yeah, and your volume must be, I'm sorry, your business must be a volume business, right? Because um, it's one thing to install a system and charge so much and make your margin on it, but if you're fixing heads and other parts of the system, the dollars aren't as large, but you probably have many tickets. Is that true?
Sure. That's a great question. That is, our business is built upon the number of projects that we do. But what we've also seen in more recent years is folks want to invest in their home and where they're at, and different components around the home don't last forever.
Yeah.
And so we've seen a bigger transition to people being more proactive now, whereas 2 decades ago it mostly was fix what's broken. Nowadays we see folks wanting to more keep up with things, and they don't want to have a 40-year-old sprinkler system that they're patching up every time they leave town so they don't have geysers popping up everywhere. And that once equipment gets old, we find ourselves recommending a lot of times that equipment be freshened up because it doesn't last forever.
No, it doesn't. It
We
does.
see a lot of projects where you're more doing more updating, and we may go in and replace all the heads or all the control valves
Yeah.
on an older system. It's pretty common to have those jobs.
Yeah. And inevitably, there's going to be a cracked piece of pipe underneath the ground that's going to have to be remedied because that happens, right? So, all these things need to be looked at. Something else that came to mind, you were talking about a geyser, is every once in a while we'll have that freeze and people don't prep their systems right. And we've all seen the pictures, right, of the fountain all of a sudden sprouting up out of the system and ice everywhere. I imagine, especially what was it, like 3 winters ago, I guess, when we had the big freeze here in Texas, you must have been really busy at that point.
You bet. That was what was that, Jim? It was 2021, and
Yeah.
we had a little bit of a freeze in 22. That was very uncommon, and we hadn't seen many storms like that in the years here, but we were hustling because in Texas most of the time you don't have to do a lot of winter preparation.
No.
And
No.
so that one definitely had us hustling. I can't remember. We replaced a lot of valves. We replaced a lot of components that folks in Texas just aren't used to it getting that cold. So no doubt that was a good year. A lot of work. That I think it was February.
It was February and it got down to like the zero mark, certainly in the single digits, and it's unheard of. Winter, like we were up in Minnesota winter. Doesn't happen that often. And on top of that, we lost our power, pretty much statewide. It was a disaster for all. And to get a lot of the parts that you use, like PVC products, a lot of those parts were really in short supply because people lost plumbing in their homes and garages and outbuildings as well. It wasn't just the sprinkler systems, it was their homes that were flooding. And it was a catastrophe. Before we wrap this up, I always like to ask this question. In your personal and or business life, what do you think your biggest win has been? Single biggest win in your personal and or business life?
So in my in my personal life, my biggest win has probably been picking my wife. She is a hard worker and has been pivotal in where we've brought the business to. As far as my work career, my business career, I'm going to go back to what I always teach my kiddos: is I was just dumb enough to keep going, to learn something, and then to stay focused. And sometimes it's the secret is in the repeating things enough times that you get really good at it and you figure out what not to do. So
So
those are
you
all great questions.
so you stuck to it, and that's the critical thing. So many of us start something and quit because we don't get the results. It's a diet. We're not losing weight. It's going to the gym. We're not building muscle fast enough. It's writing the book. It's reading the book. Some people can't even get through a book to read it, let alone write one. We give up. I think the lesson here is you didn't give up.
Just kept going. We just kept going. And that's not to say that there haven't been things along the path that we've decided were not the right way to go. But we stayed committed, and there were some bad years in there. We went through several economic cycles. We went through some really bad years. We went through people leaving the team and struggled through that, and we struggled through the times when of doubt, when you say, hey, am I doing the right thing? But ultimately there's a lot to be said for having grit and having fortitude to push through. That's a lot of the secret of where we're at today.
Well, congratulations. It sounds like your family life and your business life is doing very good. You're moving along. Congratulations. And thanks for joining me today on the podcast.
You bet. Thanks for having us on the podcast.